Oshodi under the bridge was loud that morning, but a crowd suddenly went completely silent in the chaos. Every eye fixed on a wooden chessboard placed on a rough bench amid the bustling street noise. A homeless man with an overgrown beard and tattered brown coat leaned forward with calm, steady hands. His name was Jonathan, and he moved his piece thoughtfully against his opponent across the board. Opposite him sat Williams, the famous billionaire CEO of LamsTech, dressed in an expensive navy blue suit. His black Bentley parked nearby shone like a mirror under the bright morning sun in Lagos. Jonathan touched his king, paused briefly, then looked up at Williams with a tiny, knowing smile. His eyes appeared tired yet sharp as he declared the words that stunned the gathered crowd. "Checkmate," he said firmly, and for one long second, nobody in the group breathed at all. Then the street exploded with shouts and cheers from the astonished onlookers surrounding them. "He won," someone shouted loudly, while another cried out in disbelief at the unexpected outcome. "Ah, Adi has seen drama today," a woman yelled, clapping her hands over her mouth excitedly. Williams stared at the board in shock, his mouth opening and closing without any words. He examined his trapped king, blocked rook and queen too far away to provide help. He had lost the game completely, but this wasn't where the story truly began that day. That morning, Lagos felt brighter, as if the sun had polished the clear blue sky. Williams left his mansion early, hoping to quiet the overwhelming noise inside his troubled head. Board meetings, investor calls, and staff decisions had weighed heavily on him for weeks now. When life grew too loud, he turned to the one activity that always brought him peace. He played chess passionately, loving the strategic lines, plans, and game-changing moves it involved. Sometimes, when his heart needed relief, he drove to forgotten places people often tried to ignore. He brought food, talked to strangers, and set up his board to challenge brave opponents. Today, he parked his black Bentley under the bridge at Oshodi, drawing immediate attention. People turned to look curiously, some waving, others whispering about the luxurious vehicle. A group of boys ran close, eager to see the fancy car up close and personal. Williams stepped out carefully, holding his wooden chessboard like a precious treasure chest. He searched for an opponent and spotted a lean, dusty man sitting alone nearby. Jonathan didn't beg or even lift his head when the Bentley's door shut softly. He just stared into nothing, as if lost in thoughts from a distant world. Williams walked over confidently and greeted him with a friendly good morning greeting. "Do you play chess?" he asked, hoping to engage the quiet, introspective stranger. Jonathan lifted his eyes slowly, revealing a gentle and surprisingly intelligent gaze. "Sometimes," he replied quietly, without any hint of enthusiasm or reluctance in his voice. "Let's make it interesting," Williams suggested, with a playful smile forming on his face. "If you win, take my company," he added, repeating words he'd said many times before. The street went completely still as the bold wager hung in the air unexpectedly. A hawker holding cold water bottles stopped mid-shout, stunned by the declaration. Two market women raised eyebrows at each other and laughed, assuming it was a joke. Jonathan's mouth tugged into a small, subtle smile at the surprising offer. "If you lose, will you stand by your word?" he asked quietly but seriously. Williams chuckled lightly and affirmed, "Yes, of course, unless you're afraid of defeat," he teased while setting the chessboard down between them on the rough bench. Jonathan looked around and called out to the nearby people to bear witness. "Let the whole street see how this game ends," he announced to the gathering crowd, and they came quickly, men, women, traders, drivers, and a few dusty-footed children. They formed a tight circle around the bench, eyes wide and mouths open in anticipation. They were ready to tell this unusual story to anyone who would listen later. Williams sat down confidently, and Jonathan sat across from him, shaking hands formally. The game began with focused intensity as pieces started moving across the board. From the first move, the board felt different and charged with unexpected tension. Williams liked to attack aggressively, favoring bright lines and fast, decisive victories. He moved his king's pawn forward boldly, bringing his bishop out early to aim. He planned a clever trap, a net for a proud victory he'd won before. Jonathan did not fight conventionally. He moved like water sliding around a solid stone. His knight stepped back strategically when needed, pawns shifting quietly to close doors. When Williams struck on the left, Jonathan breathed life into the right side. When Williams tried to choke the center, Jonathan opened a small, subtle window. He slipped through effortlessly, maintaining composure throughout the intense, unfolding match. "Who is this man?" One market woman whispered curiously to her companion nearby. "He's just a homeless guy," a boy replied, but his voice shook slightly. Williams leaned in closer, sensing he was playing someone dangerously skilled and perceptive. He realized the opponent saw the game in deep, intricate layers of strategy. He changed plans quickly, trying to be patient, then wild, then both combined. But each time, the board responded with Jonathan's piece landing perfectly in place. Jonathan never raised his voice or made any dramatic show during the game. He played with the quiet focus of someone who had endured much hardship. Suddenly, Williams realized his king had less room than he initially thought. A pawn he ignored now stood like a fist at his vulnerable door. A knight he deemed harmless became a hook catching his strategic sleeve. And that bishop appeared like a shadow, waiting for his final, critical mistake. Williams swallowed hard, glancing at his distant Bentley parked nearby. The car had never seemed so far away in that tense moment. He looked up at Jonathan, whose eyes remained kind, without pride or mockery. "You can still resign," Jonathan offered softly, extending a gesture of mercy. Williams's pride tightened sharply. He refused to back down from the challenge. "Play," he said firmly, determined to continue despite the mounting pressure. So they played on, the circle of people leaning closer over the board. Even the traffic seemed to hold its breath in the surrounding area. One more move, one more calculated answer, one more small door closing. Then came the decisive moment that would end the intense game. Jonathan reached out and lifted his king to set a final, perfect trap. The king touched down with a light wooden tap on the board. "Checkmate," Jonathan declared calmly, sealing the outcome of the match. For a heartbeat, Oshodi seemed non-existent. No buses, no traders, no heat. Only the undeniable truth of the board remained in that silent instant. Then the shouts erupted. "He won. Homeless man has defeated the billionaire, god of underbridge," someone yelled as hands went to heads in astonishment. A boy started dancing excitedly around the bench in pure joy. A woman laughed and cried simultaneously, overwhelmed by the unexpected victory. Williams did not move immediately, feeling a cold wave rise in his chest. He had said the words publicly, and everyone had heard his bold wager. He could not breathe in the old familiar way anymore now. Something in his life had shifted irreversibly in that single game. Slowly, he stood up, his knees trembling slightly from the shock. He reached out his hand toward Jonathan in a gesture of respect. "Congratulations," he said roughly, acknowledging the new owner and CEO of LamsTech. The circle gasped again, this time with deep respect for the outcome. Jonathan stood too, taking Williams's hand in a gentle but firm shake. His smile was warm yet sad, like someone intimately familiar with pain. Phones came out quickly, pictures snapped, and a conductor whistled loudly. Two men argued heatedly about whether this incredible event could be real. But there it was, rich man and homeless man, hands locked in promise. Williams pointed toward the Bentley and invited Jonathan to come with him. "Get in," he said, gesturing toward the luxurious backseat waiting. Jonathan turned to the crowd and thanked them for bearing witness today. "Remember what you saw," he told them before walking to the car. They entered together. The driver, stunned, opened the door hurriedly. Jonathan slid into the leather seat, enveloped by the scent of polish. The door closed with a soft, rich sound as they settled in. Williams joined him, and the driver pulled out into the busy traffic. The city swallowed them whole as they drove away from Oshodi. For a moment, neither man spoke in the quiet, luxurious interior. The chessboard rested on Jonathan's knees as they moved along. Williams stared at the passing streets, his chest tight with curiosity. With hope and fear mixed, he turned to Jonathan and asked directly, "Who are you?" he inquired, breaking the silence in the car. Jonathan looked down at his rough, scarred hands before responding slowly. He took a long breath and lifted his eyes to meet Williams's. "My name is Jonathan," he said, "and before I fell, I was—" The Bentley's phone began ringing, the dashboard lighting up with boardroom. Williams stared at the blinking screen as the ring persisted loudly. The city hummed around them, but Jonathan met his eyes steadily. "Answer it," Jonathan said softly. "It's time to keep your word." The driver glanced in the mirror, waiting for the next instruction. Williams reached toward the call as the screen flashed once more. A second incoming number appeared, cutting across the first, unknown caller. The car rolled deeper into Lagos traffic, trapped between two choices, two calls, two paths, and a promise that could change everything forever. The Bentley moved through roaring Lagos traffic with tinted windows closed. Williams sat still inside, his hand resting on the armrest thoughtfully. His mind spun faster than any of the city's bustling Danfo buses. A billionaire who had won every game until this unexpected day. Across from him sat Jonathan, quiet again, tracing the chessboard's edges. The faint smell of dust and city smoke clung to his coat, but something royal shone in the calm expression on his face, something that didn't match the worn fabric of his clothing. The phone on the dashboard stopped ringing, leaving silence in the car. Williams broke it first by asking who Jonathan really was again. Jonathan turned his head slowly, his tired eyes meeting Williams's gaze. "Just a man who made one too many wrong turns," he replied softly. "But once upon a time, I was known for something else entirely." Williams frowned curiously and asked what he was known for before. Jonathan looked out the window at the bridge where he'd slept recently. His lips tightened as he began to share his painful past. "For winning," he said, his voice carrying a hint of nostalgia. They stopped first at a small barber shop on Surla's edge. The glass door rattled when Williams pushed it open to enter. The barber, middle-aged with tired eyes, froze upon seeing them. "Ah, Chief Williams, good afternoon, sir," he said, jumping to his feet. "You came here yourself?" he asked in surprise at the visit. Williams smiled faintly and explained today's visit wasn't about him. He turned slightly and introduced Jonathan as the one needing service. The barber blinked, confused, looking at Jonathan's tangled beard and dirt. "Ah, yes, sir," the barber said softly, inviting Jonathan to sit. When the scissors began cutting, Jonathan closed his eyes peacefully. The gentle sound sliced away pieces of his old, broken life. The homeless man under the bridge started to disappear gradually. The barber trimmed the beard, shaped the hair, brushed his shoulders. When done, a stranger stared back from the mirror, transformed completely. Clean, sharp, and alive. Jonathan turned in the mirror slowly. His throat tightened as he saw the man he used to be. Williams smiled warmly and said he now looked like a CEO. Their next stop was a boutique in upscale Victoria Island area. Inside, cool air and expensive leather scent wrapped around them. The attendant's eyes widened upon seeing Williams walk in confidently, even more so when noticing the man beside him closely. "I need a black suit," Williams said firmly to the attendant. "Something fitting for a man who just won everything," he added. The attendant nodded quickly and began showing various suit options. Minutes later, Jonathan stepped out of the fitting room transformed. The black suit hugged his shoulders perfectly, looking sharp and elegant. The white shirt beneath glowed softly under the boutique lights. The store went quiet as everyone stared at the change. Even Williams stared in awe at the complete transformation. The transformation was now complete, revealing a reborn man inside. But deep in Jonathan's eyes, a personal storm still lingered quietly. By the time they reached Williams's mansion in Banana Island, sun sank. Gold light cast over white marble walls of the grand estate. Security men stood at attention as the Bentley rolled in. When Jonathan stepped out, his feet sank into trimmed grass softly. He looked around slowly at fountains, pool reflecting evening sky. Massive doors carved with LamsTech crest welcomed them inside. For years he'd walked past such gates, hungry and invisible. Now one had opened for him, changing his life forever. Williams led him into the private study, smelling of books. Whiskey and wood polish filled the air in the room. Framed certificates lined walls, Harvard, Forbes Awards, presidential photos. "Sit," Williams said, lowering into his leather chair behind desk. "We need to talk," he added, gesturing to the opposite seat. Jonathan nodded and sat across, clasping his hands together calmly. Williams leaned forward and asked who Jonathan truly was, again. Jonathan looked at him long before speaking his full story. "My name is Jonathan Atmi," he began with a trembling voice. "Years ago, I was Nigeria's national chess champion," he continued. "I represented the country in tournaments across the world, London, Sydney, New York." His voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on with determination. "I was married then to Amanda," he said, swallowing hard. "I loved her more than I loved the game itself." Williams listened intently, his face remaining unreadable throughout the tale. "One day," Jonathan continued, "she asked me to invest money into a new business her friend was starting," he explained. "I agreed because I trusted her completely at that time. But it wasn't a business. It was a cruel trap. When police stormed our home, they found drugs in safe. She had planted them there to frame me unjustly." The silence in the room thickened as the story unfolded. "I was arrested. News spread. Reputation gone in one night. My trophies taken, accounts frozen, everything lost so quickly. She testified against me in court, sealing my fate. Williams clenched his jaw tightly, absorbing the painful revelation. I spent 5 years in prison, Jonathan said quietly. 5 years thinking of the woman who betrayed my love. When I got out, she had married another man already, a billionaire investor, living the life I once provided. My home gone, friends avoided me, name just a headline. He blinked, eyes wet with unshed tears from memories. So I stopped trying and became a bridge shadow. Williams leaned back, speechless at the heart-wrenching story shared. The tale hit him harder than he had expected initially. For years, he'd played games to escape life's stresses, never realizing life could be the harshest game of all. Jonathan took a breath and explained his wager motivation. When you came this morning, I thought it was joke, but when you said take my company, I heard God asking me, will you believe again? He shared softly. He smiled faintly through tears at the divine moment. I played not to win company, but my faith back. Williams's chest tightened, feeling respect, admiration, and slight guilt. He had entered Oshodi thinking he was the hero, but he was just a chapter in another's redemption story. After long silence, Williams spoke about the wager consequences. You could take everything now, Jonathan, company, assets, shares. I said the words before witnesses. They're yours legally. Jonathan looked up sharply and shook his head firmly. No, I won't take what isn't mine, he replied. I only want a second chance. Work, dignity again. The billionaire's eyes softened at the humble response given. He stood and walked around the desk toward Jonathan. You didn't just win a game, he said earnestly. You reminded me why I started LamsTech. Build, believe, chances. He placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder with warmth. From today, you own 30% of LamsTech as partner. Jonathan froze in shock at the generous offer made. 30%. That's $800 million worth. His voice cracked. Jonathan's eyes filled again, tears he couldn't hold back. He stood and hugged Williams, shoulders shaking with emotion. Thank you for seeing me, he whispered gratefully. Williams patted his back gently in the emotional moment. No, thank you for reminding me victory is healing. Outside, the night deepened with crickets filling the air. Beyond high walls, Lagos kept moving fast and noisy. But inside the mansion, 2 men shared rare redemption. Neither knew that next morning, Jonathan's past would return, a ghost standing at the mansion gate, waiting silently. The morning sun poured over Williams's mansion white marble walls, bouncing light off the fountain and sleek black parked cars. Inside, the air smelled of fresh polish and quiet wealth. But at the front gate, a woman stood trembling anxiously.